Yeah, but both things can be true. What we don't want to happen though is like men betting out of their means, right? And taking risks that they can't bear. We're gonna see like I don't know where those numbers can jump into. And I think that's where we have to focus on is just maybe awareness around it and then just maybe don't bet your last $100 that you have to your name and start from there and then work backwards.
Welcome to Your One podcast, where future leaders take on the complexities of today.
Welcome back to Your One podcast, episode 26. That's right, 26 episodes in. So we actually have officially done a podcast every week for a half of a year. So I wanted to take a second to thank everyone who's listened, everyone who's given us feedback. We're all about improvement here, so keep it coming. And with that being said, we welcome you to another episode. And joining me, as always, is Micah McNeil, Felipe Segura, and Zachary Crilly. And this week, we are taking on the sports world, as it's pretty much caught fire in the past couple months. So why talk about sports? Ages 18 to 34, 36% of them watch sports every single day. So today we will be talking about the rise in sports betting and particularly the online gambling industry. Then we will get into women's sports and the insane numbers around their NIL numbers coming out of college. And you'll want to hear how much the top paid female and male athletes are making because you might want to get your kid very good at sports. And then we will end the episode with the new Title IX hearing that Biden passed and the implications around it. So stick around to see what the future of sports might look like. And we're going to start off with sports betting. So some numbers around that. I mean, I know our age group, for one, has gravitated towards it like crazy, with DraftKings and BetMGM giving away hundreds of dollars for a deposit of like $5 or something similar. And this all started in 2018 with a Supreme Court hearing. And now 30 states have legalized online sports betting. 46% of Americans have placed a wager in the past year. 45% of bettors are aged 23 to 35, so our age. 69% are male, and 2 out of 3 have an income of $50K or more. And looking at the industry as a whole, Americans wagered $120 billion in 2023. Lost $10.9 billion. So the house is winning, for all of you wondering. And I've bet in the past, but don't bet much anymore since I could have started a business with people fading my picks. But what do you guys make of these stats, and where do you think it's heading?
Yeah, so as you pointed out, a massive increase in sports betting since the 2018 Murphy versus NCAA Supreme Court case turned the decision back over to the states on whether they will allow online sports betting or not. Some more numbers here. 33% of Americans say that they have bet on sports, and that number rises to 47% of millennials and 58% of Gen Z. Inundated consistently with advertisements for the largest sports betting platforms. The total ad spend, I looked it up, for these platforms has shot up like a hockey stick and is now over $1 billion a year. We see it all over the place. It's hard to escape it. I was having an interesting conversation recently about whether we'll see sports betting advertisement in a similar vein to other advertisements for vices, like how there's restriction on alcohol advertisement, severe restriction on tobacco advertisement in the future. But what's the real takeaway here? This is a new industry. They expect that this industry will grow to become a $45 billion a year business. That's what Goldman Sachs says, with a 10% each year growth rate. I'm a free market guy. I've said it once, I'll say it again. In my opinion, this country was founded on 2 important pillars: radical individualism and radical free markets. I'm for states having the decision to legalize sports betting and for people to have the decision to partake or not. With that said, I do see this having detrimental effects on the future financial position of our generation, of Gen Z, from money being spent on sports betting that would traditionally go towards more sound investments.
I will say as well that there is a part of this sports betting dynamic that I don't think a lot of people understand, because it's, as you pointed out, Gavin, mainly an issue for, or an area of interest for men aged 25 to 35. And so that's something that you think a lot of leaders are like talking about and are thinking about all the time, but it's not really affecting them. Kind of like how we're talking about social media 10 years after the fact and talking about how there's a generation of children being, Jonathan Haidt's called the lonely generation or whatnot. Right now, I think the same thing is going to happen with sports betting. I wouldn't be surprised to see if there are problems down the line that it completely went away from leaders, or regulators didn't really pay attention to it because it wasn't affecting them. So this is a really interesting area to keep our attention to. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Gavin and then Zach, you guys made two really big notes. I think one, the House winning, the House being up 10 bill in the last year, very huge. And then when you said 69% of sports bettors or gamblers in general are men, so this is obviously something that's going to affect men more. And then Zach, you alluded to sort of millennials, and that's mostly men our age, from just the economics of it. And I think that this is going to be a huge problem. To me personally, I was someone who was very actively in sports gambling when I was in college, and I lost way more times than I won. And I think that is the ultimate reality for the overwhelming majority of sports bettors. So to, Felipe, what you sort of ended on like sort of these implications, and what we talked about before we started the episode was this is going to be a pandemic level of just where this goes and how this affects men. And it's going to be way more adverse because men were, obviously, I guess, more risk aggressive. And we like thrill, and we want money, and we want monetary happiness or monetary, feeling. And so wherever this goes could have very grave implications. So we'll see. We'll definitely see.
It's almost like social media on steroids, like the dopamine spike that you receive from these winnings, and the fact that they're allowed to hook you by saying you can put $5 down and we'll give you $100 to bet with. And then you're just automatically hooked. It's like a drug for free, and it's obviously addictive, but it's going to be almost like this same thing as social media, but on a way bigger scale, because it can affect your family and friends. But I don't know if this is a majority of people that are like, oh yeah, I'll bet on my favorite team for the playoffs. Or is it the addiction just beginning, and that's going to get a lot worse?
Well, that's the thing, is that it's all relatively new. The concept of gambling has been around since the age of man, but online gambling, direct to consumer, you can sit in your home and do it as you bet in live time. That's all new. And I'm curious where you see this going for our generation in particular in the future. Will this become like a tobacco, like an alcohol, where the regulators will step in and say, we need to limit the exposure that young minds, developing minds get to advertisements for this product? Or do we see this continuing to develop and continue as almost the Wild West of industry?
I think it will absolutely be regulated. I think just like social media is almost like a right, left, both sides are agreeing that this is really bad for children. I think sports betting or gambling online is definitely going to have the same result, because it's not just, oh, you're betting on the Wizards. Well, no one ever bets on the Wizards, but betting on, some team to win, right? It's about side betting of, oh, is this person going to have a triple double tonight? Or is this person going to get some other stat? You can make side bets on side bets. So there has to be some type of regulation, because it's just taking advantage of our primal brains, right? So
I honestly don't think it's if, it's when. Like, when did they stop tobacco or get regulations around that? Oh, it causes cancer. Okay, we gotta prevent that. but it's not until like those addiction numbers go way up they're gonna do something. But it'll be interesting to see when that does occur.
I necessarily agree with that though, because I think that people should be empowered to make the decisions that benefit them the most, but then the government has to let those people make the decisions. If you want to smoke, if you want to drink, if you want to bet, go, be my guest. But you can't expect for then the government to come and pick up the pieces when those things lead to a failed quality of life.
Yeah, but both things can be true. What we don't want to happen though is like men betting out of their means, right? And taking risks that they can't bear. We're gonna see, like, I don't know where those numbers can jump into. And I think that's where we have to focus on, is just maybe awareness around it, and then just maybe don't bet your last $100 that you have to your name, and start from there and then work backwards.
I think it becomes a weird gray line between that and the stock market, for instance, or that and other financial tools
Yeah.
where people can say, hey, I use sports betting as a means of income, just like hundreds of thousands of people across the country use the stock market as a means of income.
That's a good point.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't. That's up to chance completely, though. I mean, I guess the stock market is too, but there's value there and there's information there. But it will be interesting to see where it goes. But what I do have numbers around is the women's college basketball market, and that is absolutely booming. In 2022, there were 4.8 million viewers, and in the championship game a couple weeks ago, there were 18.8 million. Men's had 14.4, and I mean these athletes are getting paid too. The NIL deals went to women college athletes 52% of the time, and Livy Dunn is actually the highest paid women's athlete at $3.7 million. I mean, I can't help but think, like, do you guys believe this is a boom in the market and it might calm down, or is it just going to take off like a rocket ship?
I hate to say, let me preface. I watched Caitlin Clark versus LSU, and then I watched the UConn USC game after, and they were sick. These women are actually amazing at basketball. Like, their talent is absolutely insane. Has it reached its peak? Maybe. But I think if there continues to be this fluctuation of, like, world-class, like, players, like Caitlin Clark, like I was saying it to you guys, she's shooting 30-foot jumpers. Like, the NBA line is, like, 23 and a half. Like, that is absolutely insane. So where this goes is, has it reached its peak? That's like a really good question, but it's something I'm really interested in. And if they keep having these individuals that are charismatic and have their own profile, then maybe it does continue to increase on the college level and on the professional level. So we'll see.
There's room for growth. If you look at women's and men's tennis, there's somewhat similarities in viewership and for certain people. So yeah, I think they can be just as popular, the two. I don't know. I wouldn't make a bet that women's basketball is going to be as popular as men's collegiate basketball or whatnot, but it's possible. So just something to wait and see.
What I find pretty incredible is that Caitlin Clark, her WNBA deal was about $75K a year. And she was making, I think her NIL was more than, I think it was 2.2 million. And she's now getting paid $75K, as much as like a college graduate, first year out of college. But where she does make most of her money is that Nike deal she just signed, which is millions. I'm not sure the actual amount, but they're definitely going to get paid through these sponsorships.
Yeah, college women's basketball is in a good spot as it, compares to men's college basketball, because the women are staying longer. So you're able to build a relationship with these women. And then, like you said, like the influx of NIL, they're able to create their own individual brands, right? So how that maybe can help the WNBA is having more Caitlin Clarks. Because, like, if Caitlin Clark's playing in New York, I'm going to go see that game now, right? Whereas, like, ordinarily I probably wouldn't have. right? So if you can keep having these individuals that can sort of uplift the sport, it's going to change. But those economics on which he's getting paid, like, I'm sorry, the WNBA, but like, if you want to make more money, you got to put more people in the seats, and that's simply what it is. So it's going to be very interesting. I'm super interested in women's sports, no, women's basketball, and that's the first time ever. So we'll sort of see where this goes. I'm excited about it.
But the economic incentive is there, right, for some of these sponsorships because Nike sells basketball shoes for women, and so you need a figurehead for women's basketball, right? So there is an incentive. You just need to craft the right story or the right set of events need to happen. But yeah, there's definitely a market. So
I honestly think this is just the beginning. I think there's going to be opportunities for revenue shares with the teams. They're talking about consolidating the entire leagues or the different conferences into a giant super league, and that could bring a bunch of opportunity. And it's actually like a private equity guy that's beginning it. I forget who it is, but it's one guy that's very close to Roger Goodell, I believe from the NFL, and they're going to try at least to create this super league in the NCAA, which could have huge implications on just how the payment is structured and the market going forward. Somebody's going to do it though. But on female college athletes, there was big news just on April 19th, so 2 days ago, that the U.S. Department of Education just released its final ruling on Title IX, which has to do with allowing anyone and everyone to participate in youth and college sports.
I was surprised that they had dedicated staff that were there to enforce Title IX rules. So since 1972, there have been 20 amendments to Title IX, and the latest amendment does three things. It extends protection to new classes. It promotes more accountability, and it empowers students and families. This is the big line heads. What does that actually mean? So the expanded protection, the latest update expands Title IX protections to include sex stereotypes, sexual orientation, gender identity, and sex characteristics. And then on the promotion of accountability, what this is doing is dismantling a prior amendment that had an innocent until proven guilty clause. So this stated that in cases that were brought before the Title IX coordinator on a college campus, there has to be a presumption of innocence, as this is all extrajudicial charges. So these are the main 2 points that in my research I came up with as changes. And these will have, let's see what the implications are. Obviously, transgender access to sports and participation in sports is a hot button culture war issue. And this is, with the Democratic administration, one of their inroads on that. So it's yet to see what the implications will be, but certainly a hot button culture war issue with potential future results that are to be seen and to be determined.
yeah, I'll kick in something. I mean, one thing I'm definitely not a fan of, aside from the more hot button culture war issues, is there seems to be an impediment on speech now, and the U.S. is usually a little bit later than other countries on certain social issues. But this happened in Canada where they essentially, you could go to jail or you could be fined for misgendering people. And I tend not to be a fan of prohibiting certain rights of free speech. And I think there's a weird instance in universities where they get to have their own judicial system in some capacity. And I think this is a big issue. I know Jordan Peterson, the famous, I guess he's more now right wing commentator, came to fame essentially by advocating against Canada's law. And I think this is going to have similar implications in the US. I don't think this is going to do what people on the left want it to do. I think this is actually going to stoke more outrage. And overall, I think I
Yeah, in that
disagree
same
with
vein.
kind
So I
of
was
limiting
introduced to
people's free
this new
speech.
Title IX from a tweet by Riley Gaines, who's the Kentucky swimmer who is very, I guess, pro women's rights. Like she's like famous. She has like pro common sense, pro women's rights in her Twitter bio. And she spoke against transgender women being allowed in swimming. And I remember when she had went to, I think it was San Francisco State, to speak about the issue, and she was sort of shouted down. And she's been a really big proponent. She's sort of like been hugged by, I guess, the right or the far right in this case. But I think the free speech point of it is very important. To leave it up to interpretations as it applies to pronouns, how that can be translated to sexual assault, it's very tricky. And it's a topic that, I think there needs to be some more time and more grace given for everyone involved. But just to totally like just strike down and be like, leave it up to subjective interpretation is a very scary
Yes, and
premise to
three
start
things
with.
that we know,
And
as
I think
said,
that's something that
the
is
true
going to be
implications,
tricky moving
both of you
forward.
have echoed, the true implications are unknown. What this amendment essentially is it's a murking of the waters. It's creating a gray area for potential future actions. But three things that we do know. One is the presumption of guilt. Our justice system is built upon a presumption of quasi-kangaroo court being set up in colleges that will have real-life implications on those that are implicated in their actions is something that we should be concerned about and push back against. Additionally, administrative burden. I was amazed going to school at how many admins there were, how many people worked there that weren't professors, and the Association of Title IX Administrators has grown from 0 to 5,000 over the last 5 years. So this is increasing the admin burden of schools, which will increase costs of education for students. And lastly, the states, the power of the states to decide what does and does not work for them. As we just discussed, the states were able to decide in sports betting. West Virginia passed a law that was essentially, it's been labeled the West Virginia transgender sports ban. And just this week, a federal court blocked their ability to implement that law. So these three things are what we're seeing today as the implications of these Title IX changes.
It's interesting to see where this is going to fall because I feel like this reminds me of, I guess, maybe 5 or so years ago when companies were hiring like crazy on teams to ensure equity in the company, and 5 years down the road they weren't doing a whole lot and ended up firing a lot of people. So I'm wondering if that's going to be a similar story. But also on the other side of this, in 2023 there's an act called Protection of Women and Girls in Sports Act, which was actually passed by the House. So there's a kind of a combating act here, ruling, that might find that middle ground. And with people spearheading this, like that woman athlete that Micah highlighted, there could be definitely some backlash, and it might just take some time for that to come out, but we'll see where it heads.
One last thing, I mean, the problem with this also is that they give this murky water new interpretation of law that is up to the discretion of the university to decide on. And this is a time when confidence in universities is at an all-time low. And so this is one of those decisions where you really believe that the administrators, the same administrators that were on Congress, that were at Congress and said couldn't condemn genocide of Jews being said on campus, like that same group, now you're giving them discretion to kind of make these murky decisions up to their
It
best
certainly doesn't
judgment.
feel like a step
I don't
in
know.
the right
This seems counterintuitive right now on behalf of the federal government. This is probably a time where you should probably step up and make rules really, really clear so that people can't get confused and stuff like that. But I don't know.
If you guys were in Congress,
At least
what would
as
your
a
reaction?
yeah, as if I like say, oh, like you're super hot, but you're like not pervious of me saying that, is that sexual assault? Like it, so making it very clear exactly what is or what isn't, but that's hard to do. But I think leaving it up for interpretation, and then what Felipe said, these same universities, and then I mean, if you look at a lot of the elite bicoastal, these bicoastal elite academic institutions, a lot of them are very left leaning, and so for it to be like, really up into interpretation of what is or what isn't, and being, I guess, more pervious to the argument of the accuser versus the accusee.
That frankly, I think that both sides like to play it off of each other, and that's the best thing politically. But realistically, what I would propose is setting up a judicial system, like a court system, to take these cases and give decisions and have that be based off of written case law, so that these things are black and white and not murky gray, leave it up to admins that are neither elected nor true judicial figures. I think that it would.
So would that be a branch of government, or would that be a branch of the university? But that would increase the. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, so but why not then just have the same for government? Like the same law system that we currently have. Why make a special one for the university? Is there something that university students can't tolerate? Like university students are meant to go into the world after university. So shouldn't they be following the same laws that are
Admins to decipher these cases, which can be quite confusing and can have implications. They're often very emotionally charged. To take it from being their responsibility and give it to a third party that has black and white definitions of what is and is not allowed, and interjects that with the presumption of innocence that is standardized in our whole justice system. Because what we have now is this half-baked, half government, half on the school. The school is the one that makes the final decision. I think that is broken, and that has and will continue to lead to many mistakes on the school admin's part.
I guess, I mean, the part to summarize it up is that, I mean, it's going to start on August, and then we're going to have an election in November. So depending on how that goes, it could be quickly changed again. So it's just going to be this cycle where it goes to one side and then goes to another. That's going to be super interesting too. Because, I mean, this is what, in the assumption that, or in the scenario that Trump wins, he's just going to put back all the things that he had under Title IX before Biden came into office. So, yeah, it's just going to be the seesaw effect almost.
The election's going to be a fun time, fun period. It's coming up. We'll have to get some guests back on for election season. Liam, if you're listening to this, we welcome you back. But this for this conversation, Year One Podcast, episode 26. We're going to wrap up here. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and we will catch you next week.